Lester, thank you for being here today. We want to give you just a little token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
It's a Geiger counter. Cool.
yeah. We will start off our questions from the students. Would the first student like to stand up and ask a question?
Hello, my
Hi.
name is Gabrielle Carrera, and I'm a communications major at Dreyfus School of the Arts. So it seems that you seem to have a lot of interests. You've dabbled in acting, in movies and television. You're a self-proclaimed bass player. You're a reporter and a news anchor. So what facet of your professional life gives you the most satisfaction?
Oh, wow. Well, you know, I always joke that I'm really a musician who's still trying to make it, and I'm doing TV until I can, like, make it as a musician. I am a bass player. You know, one of the interesting things is I have 3 jobs because I do nightly news, I do Today, and those are very different kinds of shows, and then I do Dateline, and people say, which one do you like the best? And I don't really know. I think the Today show I enjoy, I don't want to say the most because it allows me to be me. The format of that show allows you to really kind of let your hair down and be exactly who you are. Nightly news, because my background is in hard news, I love doing because it's hard news. And it's the top stories of the day, and we really roll up our sleeves, and it's a lot of editorial input. Dateline I'm enjoying because I've never had a lot of experience doing long-form reporting, meaning we spend months on a story, and that, any journalist will tell you, is a satisfying thing to be able to have time to really, investigate. But from day in and day out thing, I really enjoy the Today Show because we go from the really hard stories to the fun stories to, dressing up for Halloween, and I get to, I feel like the viewer gets to know us in ways that they don't on the other shows.
And I forgot to ask for second round of question card pickup. So if you have a question ready, if you could please raise that in the air. I know some of our volunteers are already beginning to pick up questions.
Did I answer your question, Gabrielle?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
And we'll go to the second student, please.
All right, thank you. Hi, Mr. Holt. I'm Daniel Milstein, also a communications major at Dreyfus, specializing in speech and debate and journalism. So first, thank you so much. It's great to hear you talk as a rising journalist.
Thank you.
We know that in the past couple of years you've done a couple of segments about your son going off to college. So a bunch of us are seniors here, and we were wondering, from what you learned, what advice do you have for us who are going to be going off to college in very soon?
I'm proud to say my son, Stefan, he used to work here at Channel 25 until the spring. He went to college out in California, and the advice I would have, he's now in Chicago, by the way, what he did, he took advantage of the production and television program at his campus, university, learned how to shoot and how to edit and how to write. All those things are important. When I got into television, I worked in bigger markets. I didn't know how to edit or shoot a camera, and thankfully I didn't have to. But the way the business is now, we all have to be able to do a lot more things. And it's probably the same way it is in a lot of different businesses. People have to be able to do more than one job. And so what you're learning generally in school now, using nonlinear editing, those sort of things, those are the things we do now at the professional level. There used to be a gap between what you learned in college and what was really happening. Now the technology has basically merged. It's all digital. So that's important, but I think writing is the most important component of being a good broadcast journalist. And sometimes people don't recognize that. They want to look good and and dress the part and get their voice right and all that. And that's all a component. But writing, the ability to take a story, sometimes a complicated story, and boil it down in as little as a minute and a half sometimes, while still, mining out the important parts and keeping some balance and perspective. That is a challenge. And so I invite you to watch, the nightly news, and you'll hear some great examples of really, really strong writers. But I think that's probably the most important thing of what we do, is the ability to put those words together and match them with the pictures.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What story had the biggest impact on you?
I think the earthquake in Haiti probably had the biggest personal impact. I've seen and witnessed a lot of death and destruction, but I'd never experienced death on that level. There were some just purely horrific moments of standing amid rubble, and then you're kind of looking, and suddenly you realize, oh my God, that's a leg. or that's a foot, and seeing these kind of things, and suddenly, you know, you're seeing things that were there a whole time, was very difficult. To see a field where people were just not even a mass grave, I mean, just dumping bodies in a field was very, very difficult to witness. I went back to cover the year anniversary and still found bodies. A year ago, still found bodies in rubble. I mean, literally walking across and realizing that they're there. It was the only story I ever covered where I felt the need to take advantage of some counseling. And I'd mentioned in my remarks that the reaffirming thing was that we brought the public's attention to it. That was important for me, because when you're covering stories like that sometimes, at least personally, there are moments you start to feel like, God, I'm a horrible vulture. I'm here, you know, paying witness to this horrible thing, and what am I doing? What am I bringing? I'm not bringing any food or water. What am I doing here? And then you're reminded, and you look out on the airfield and you see these planes coming from all over the world with food and medicine and doctors and people, you know, finding their way down there, and you realize that's because of us. That's because of the work we're doing as journalists. And that was a reaffirming thing of that. But that was probably the story that had the most impact on me.
This question is regarding when you interview someone. How do you balance asking the hard questions that the viewers want to hear versus the danger that the guest won't ever want to come back to be interviewed?
That's a good question. I have a very simple approach to that. I respect everybody that comes on my show. I'm not your enemy, and I want them to know that I'm going to ask you hard questions. I'm a friendly guy, and I don't take anything personally. So it doesn't matter whether I hate your politics, love your politics, you know, watch your movies. It doesn't matter. I respect you because you're there. You're my guest, and so I try to let them know that and disarm them right away. And I try to ask the hard questions in a respectful way, and sometimes that means couching it, like, you know, listen, you know, this question has come up, it has to be asked, or you have to also recognize sensitivities. I interviewed Jennifer Hudson a few weeks ago for a Dateline that aired like a week ago Sunday. She's very sensitive, and we were told she did not want to talk about the murder of her family. And I recognize that. I also recognize that viewers would wonder, well, why didn't you ask about that? And so you find a way to get there. And one of the ways was, you know, I talked about the Super Bowl in '09 when it was the first time she came out after that, and how emotional that moment was. And I got her to talk about that, and the conversation progressed naturally. You can't come in and hammer people over the head. Now, you know, with all due respect to the politicians in the room, you know, you owe us a little more, and so we'll come at you a little harder. And I think, you know, everybody gets that. That's the way it works. But I think people have to know that you respect them, and that you, in some cases, you empathize with them. You know things are difficult, but you want them to also understand. You want to make sure they understand what you do. That you're a journalist. At the end of the day, you're not their friend. You're a journalist, and I have a responsibility to my audience. And I think once they know that, they get it.
Some of our audience members want to get a little bit of insight into the networks from you. Just how much collegiality is there between competing networks?
You know, we don't hang out together. But you'd be surprised when a lot of times it's like when we end up at, you know, we all end up in a tornado somewhere, and then we're all on the ground, and then you kind of hang out there. At the end of the day, we're all doing the same thing, and listen, you know, we compete with CBS and ABC. You know, they all put on, you know, fine broadcasts. They've got fine journalists. You know, but yet it's nice to be number one. What can I say? It's nice to be number one. But no, we don't. We do play each other in softball. We do have a softball league in New York, and there's usually a little drinking that goes on after that. So, you know, we're not enemies. I mean, it's like any other business. You respect your competitors, but you want to beat the daylights out of them.
Do you ever feel trapped by the attitudes of the networks?
I don't understand the question.
It says here, talking about in terms of digital communication in our society and the scripted world of broadcast journalism. Do you ever feel trapped that in some of your news segments you're not able to really say what you want to say? No,
I don't really. I mean, you know, there's, you know, at the end of the day, we're just, it's the basic rules of journalism that control what we say. No one is, you know, if you're talking about corporate influence and that kind of thing, no one's telling me what I can't report, or, you know, other than is it journalistically sound and correct. We have editors, as we should, to go through all of our scripts. I think we're actually at a really exciting time in journalism now because there's more ways to get on the air. I mentioned, running around with my iPhone. Twitter has become a terrific tool of what we do. I was in Italy a couple times this fall covering the Amanda Knox trial, and I was in the courtroom. They allowed cameras in the courtroom only during when Amanda and Raphael would come in. They'd allow us to shoot that, but then they kind of kicked us out, and you had to shoot off of a TV monitor. But it wasn't very good. We couldn't really do live broadcasts. But I was in the courtroom, and they actually allowed us to have our smartphones in there, and I started tweeting. And, Amanda says this, she says this, and just giving kind of a blow-by-blow account. And I thought, wow, this is really empowering. A lot more ways to report. That doesn't go through an editor. That's me, at that point, reporting directly to the audience. And people glommed onto that, and they were very interested in it. So it's actually kind of a neat time. We've got a bigger voice and more ways to reach our audiences.
And you were just talking about Twitter and social media. Where do you think all of these new tools will be taking us in the future?
Well, they're a two-edged sword. I mentioned it was great during the Arab Spring. A lot of the images that galvanized the world were pictures of being beat up in Syria and Egypt, and they were put out over Twitter and Facebook. The two-edged sword part of it, the part that's difficult for journalists, is we don't have a way to verify that video. Somebody uploads secret police cracking someone's skull. It's compelling video, but was that taken yesterday? Was that taken 6 weeks ago? And so we have to constantly remind our viewers of that. The other difficult we have is we're competing. I mentioned citizen journalists. We're competing with you. If something happens right now outside this hall, a bunch of you are going to take your cell phones and you're going to shoot whatever happens. You may get it on the air before we do. At least you'll get it in the social network universe before we do, but not necessarily with the same editorial judgment that we might do. We still are obligated to confirm, what we know, that a picture in itself is not a story. It's the information behind it. But at the same time, we're forced to act sometimes quicker than we want to because this stuff is out there. Things will take off in the Twitter universe. And we can't always sit on our hands because we start to look stupid. People are saying, well, hey, NBC, don't you know about this or that? So that's really complicated things. It's great in that it's given us more reach and people are a part of the process, but we've lost the ability to sometimes control these things in a way that, a responsible way of reporting them.
Do you find the proliferation of cable news to have affected the quality of news reporting in general?
I think, I think cable news has become more about cable talk. I think that's where the genre has found its niche in a very successful way. I think MSNBC, Fox, and CNN have become very successful in the evenings with talk as opposed to straightforward news reporting. It's complicated things only to the extent is we've had to educate audiences the difference between what cable is doing and what we're doing on a traditional newscast like nightly news. It's expected now, and we understand that the cable hosts in the evening generally have a political point of view or a point of view. We, on the other hand, on our NBC News programs do not. It was difficult, I think, for a while for the viewers to understand that because they see the same peacock and they see people sitting around a fancy desk in suits, and we're all kind of talking about the same things. And I think there was a sense for a while that, well, if your cable channel is left or right, then therefore you are left or right. I think people are beginning to understand now the difference between the genres in that they have a certain expectation they bring when they turn on, MS and Fox and CNN, and hopefully a different expectation when they turn on nightly news or Today Show.
What was your favorite place that you have traveled for work?
Oh, it's always the last place I visited, but I enjoy Turkey. Matt does his Where in the World is Matt Lauer thing. Not this last trip, the trip before, they send a correspondent to each country ahead of him to do stories ahead of time. And so I got to spend time touring the country of Turkey. And I found that fascinating because I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East and I've spent a lot of time in Europe, and it's kind of where the two kind of merge, the Arab and Middle East culture, but also with some of the European sophistication. So that was an exciting place to go. But that's frankly one of the great parts of the job. I love the travel. I like meeting people. I've been studying Italian for the last couple of years, so now I'm like itching for Italian stories. And I'm like, I was going to actually pitch to go cover the little ship disaster, but I knew you'd be mad at me, so I didn't. But I've thought about it.
We thank you for that.
Sure, sure.
What else do you hope to accomplish?
I don't know. I mean, I'm in a different role in that, you know, I thought at this point in my career I would be doing a Monday through Friday show. You know, but the fact is when you get up this point of the pyramid, there's only so much room, and you know, I'm at a very successful network, which is a good thing. But they've managed to find new roles for me. That's why I have many jobs that all add up to one big job. So right now, I'm all about new challenges. Dateline has been a new kind of challenge. It's allowed me to exercise different kinds of news muscles, which I'm enjoying. So this is my, you know, the current challenge, and we'll see in a few years. But I always say, and I've always said this long before I got to this point, that sometimes you're so busy climbing the ladder, you forget to stop and enjoy the view from the rung you're on. And I always try to remind myself of that, you know, wow, this is as far as my career ever went. This is pretty cool. So I try to keep that in mind. So I'm having fun.
What is your opinion about pop culture and celebrity being included in news reports?
I think it's good. I think I never, as I said, I never position myself as a know-it-all. I'm not smarter than any of my viewers. People like pop culture. The balance for us is to report these things, but keep a balance and make sure that it's a full plate of food. You got to have your vegetables too. And we talk about that sometimes, you know, when we're planning a broadcast, like, look, you got to have the broccoli. So you mentioned Kardashians or Jersey Shore, but you know, there's also this election thing going on. It's a constant challenge, though, especially for those of us who've been in this a while and remember the days when, you know, news was very sober and straight ahead. But we can never place ourselves above the news. I think probably one of the faults of TV news in years gone by was an arrogance that we're smarter than you and we know more than you and here's what you need to hear. I think we still have a responsibility as from our position to give you things that we do think you need to know about. But you know, far be it from us to say, well, you know, we're not going to talk about what you may be talking about at the water cooler. We can't ignore the fact that, you know, you all watched, you know, Survivor last night or whatever the show is. Those things are part of the national conversation, especially in the world of Twitter and Facebook and those sorts of things. So we can't cut off that part of the world. It's about, my personal sense is that we've got to find some balance and make sure we cover those things that folks are talking about, but also covering the things that really affect our lives.
And final question. If Matt Lauer leaves the Today Show, are you interested?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah. No, I would. Yeah. Absolutely, sure. But just as cameras rolling, and just so anybody's clear, I have no knowledge of any changes are coming, so don't go writing anything bad, because I honestly don't know. So.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. We will see you on Tuesday, January 31st. Thank you again.